Hello and welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alex Truelove. I'm BPI's Legislation and Advocacy Manager. I've been with BPI since March of 2022. Some of you may recognize me from our webinar last year discussing this bill, House Bill 1799 in Washington State, which I will from now on refer to as the Organic Materials Management Bill. We discussed this bill shortly after it passed the legislature and was signed by the governor. So even though we had a lot of great information to share, there were, as expected, a lot of remaining questions about how the bill might be interpreted and enforced and how the state of Washington might put some of the information online and communicate with members and folks making compostable products in terms of how best to comply and how to navigate the bill as it becomes law. I know those of you who are members and working to comply, which is probably most, if not all of you, have a lot of questions remaining, and we're excited to hopefully answer a few of those. I expect some of them will be answered preemptively by Tina, our esteemed guest. If not, please use the Q&A function to ask questions. We are scheduling time to field questions from you all that may not be covered in some of the prepared material that we have today. So we will do our best to ensure that we address each one of those. Again, this webinar is recorded as well. So if you miss an answer or need to go back to refer to the answer, you should be able to do so. I think, as we all know, compostable product labeling has gained a lot of recent interest in the last couple of years. Even this legislative session, we had bills that passed in Colorado and Minnesota that either mirror or in some cases build upon, and in other cases actually depart slightly from what Washington State has started. But there's no question that Washington State, with their Organic Materials Management Bill, really put a lot of exciting policies in motion. So we will focus on that today, but know that, for example, we are thinking about this within the context of the Canadian government, for example, exploring similar national regulations. And so I want to take a minute to maybe contextualize the moment we're in, and provide BPI's perspective on how we ended up here and how BPI has been advocating for labeling legislation and regulations to help distinguish our products and reduce contamination. So as I conceive of it, labeling policies can contain, not necessarily all three, but can contain what I would consider kind of three major buckets. One is a movement to require third-party certification. So that's a way to ensure performance and compliance and reward what I might call the good guys. This is something that actually many of our allies in Colorado started using the phrase rewarding good guys. Number two, prohibiting misleading terminology. So terms like degradable, decomposable, terms that don't have an attached standard specification like compostable does, words that are unqualified in that sense. And we're also products that use those terms that are known contaminants, what we might call lookalikes or sound-alike products. And so prohibiting that terminology is a way to address some of the bad guys, if you will. And then finally, I think what is maybe most interesting and exciting about this bill in Washington is the introduction of more visual requirements to distinguish compostable from non-compostable products. So color, symbols, logos, specific text. So we'll get into that. But in this case, what I think makes Washington unique is this was, by my counts, the first single piece of legislation to include all three of those buckets, and really, I think, create a comprehensive vision of how compostable products can be labeled and therefore be a bigger part of the compost industry moving forward. And I know Tina's going to talk about the larger bill, since we're really focusing on just one section of a much broader effort to improve organics management in Washington. So with that, I'd like to introduce our esteemed guest, Tina Schaefer at the Washington Department of Ecology. Tina, I know you have some great information to share. I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Alex. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. As Alex mentioned, I'm Tina Schaefer. I'm responsible for compliance with compostable products labeling and declaration requirements as part of the Center for Sustainable Food Management. This team is part of the Department of Ecology's Solid Waste Management Program. So a few weeks ago, I took my family on a trip to San Francisco, and we had a great meal, fish and chips at a local food truck. And as we finished up and went to leave, we were faced with this, and it led to confusion. There was one bucket for compost and one bucket for recycling, and then no waste. And we had in our hands trays with little cups, little portion cups and napkins and some, food wrap paper, and no signage and no distinguishing marks on the items in our hands. And I like to think of myself as a pretty savvy recycler and a composter, and I didn't know what to do with the items. So think of what the average typical consumer feels when met with this. And, that's, I feel, one of the main reasons that Washington State chose to tackle this situation when passing House Bill 1799 was to attempt to eliminate some of this confusion for consumers. So let's back up a bit, and we'll start briefly with a little bit of background on the organics management law. In 2022, Washington legislature passed House Bill 1799, and I won't call it that anymore either, but it was requiring diversion of organic materials away from landfill disposal and towards food rescue programs and organics management facilities. So there are 5 strategies you can see here that are used in the organics management law: research, prevention, collection, processing, and markets. And these focus areas are designed to work together to achieve the organic material rescue and diversion goals based on 2015 disposal levels. So for those organic management goals, these actions that I just spoke of will really help Washington achieve its 2030 goal to cut landfill disposal organic materials by 75% compared to 2015. So the aim by 2025 is that the amount of edible food wasted in landfill disposal must be reduced by 20%. So that's about 78,000 tons of good food rescued for people to eat. And other organic materials will be processed at composting facilities, anaerobic digesters used for vermiculture, and other emerging technologies. So why focus on organics? Municipal solid waste landfills are a significant source of methane emissions. Washington's most recent greenhouse gas inventory reported approximately 1.5 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions from solid waste at landfills, which was approximately 2% of our state's total greenhouse gas emissions in 2018. Our 2020-2021 waste characterization study revealed that organics made up the largest percentage of the overall statewide disposed waste stream at 22.8%, or about 1.2 million tons in 1 year. So if you add in the compostable paper to the organics, wood, C&D waste, it's over half the disposed waste stream, about 52%. In terms of greenhouse gases, these are important materials since the organics degrade faster than other materials, causing more greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, enough with that. Now the real reason that we're all here. The plastic product degradability law. So when 1799 was passed last year, Section 8 of that bill amended Washington Code 70A.455, the plastic product degradability law, more simply known to me as compostable products labeling law. And this sets standards, marketing claim standards for compostable products sold in Washington state. The law requires labeling and declarations for compostable products, and the aim is that these requirements will reduce misleading, confusing, and deceptive labeling practices. So what do we say when we mean degradability labeling. So what they put forward, the legislature, was a system of labeling that clearly and truthfully identifies how a product will react to various environmental conditions. Environmental marketing claims for plastic products should adhere to a uniform, recognized standards for compostability. And since misleading, confusing, and deceptive labeling can negatively impact local composting programs and compost processors, plastic products that are marketed as being compostable should be readily and easily identifiable as meeting those standards. And not all compost facilities, especially in Washington State, accept compostable packaging. Many facilities say that the confusion around what materials are accepted leads to problems with contamination, additional processing costs, reduced quality of their final product. So implementing a standardized system and test methods may create the ability for more of our compost facilities to come online and take these products in the future. And these regulations really focus on limiting false and misleading environmental claims known as greenwashing for plastic products claiming to be compostable or biodegradable when really they're not. So one of the main revisions that 1799 did to the degradability law was it made several, it prohibited several labeling claims on products. And so products sold into the state of Washington can no longer be labeled with these terms: biodegradable, degradable, decomposable. I don't think I've ever actually seen that one. OXO degradable or any similar term. So as far as the labeling requirements, and I know this is a lot of words on the page, but it is a lot of words in the law. So these are the general requirements for compostable products sold into Washington State. And we'll get a little bit more into the nuanced details of the specific products. So for film bags, a producer of film bags that meet the ASTM standard specifications and is distributed or sold by retailers must ensure that that film bag is readily and easily identifiable from other film bags. And so with that, the law sets forward that they must be labeled with third-party certification logos like BPI. They have to be labeled with the word compostable on both sides. There's certain coloring or tinting regulations that they must, reach by using green, brown, or beige. And so this all leads to them being distinguishable upon quick inspection for sorting, not just by in sorting facilities, but also by the public. Many of the same regulations apply to plastic food service products. I know something we're all very interested in here today, labeled with third-party certification logo, labeled with the word compostable, colored green, beige, or brown, be distinguishable upon quick inspection for sorting. And then, as Alex mentioned earlier, you can incorporate the use of unique graphic elements, text boxes, stripes, bands, to further increase that distinction when sorting. So what do we mean when we talk about food service products? So these are just some examples. The law goes into a little bit more detail, but we're talking about plates, cups, bowls, portion cups, utensils, things that I know a lot of us on this call today are very familiar with. Plastic film products, very similar to the food products. I think not much is different here, except for there's a little bit difference with the way they can be labeled compostable. These are things like, I think of the plastic, if you get toilet paper, plastic wraparound toilet paper, things like that. And then let's see. sorry, I cannot see the top of my slide. The compostable product declaration, something I'm sure we're all interested in again. So these are some dates to note. By January 1, 2024, compostable product producers need to submit a one-time declaration into our online portal. I'll do a short demo of that later on the webinar. And so that's just one time for products. And then after January 1, 2024, a new declaration would be required only if a new product is being sold into Washington, or if the products that are already registered have been materially changed in some way. You would just need to update those products. So who's responsible? The law is pretty clear. It's the producer of the compostable products. It goes into some more nuanced detail about who exactly is considered the producer. If you have questions about that, you can get in touch with me and we can talk more about that, or we can answer that on this webinar as well. And then what happens? What happens if a product is sold that's not compliant? So right now, we're okay. We're trying to slowly get away from that. But after July 1, and this is something that changed with the passage of 1799, the organics law. Before it was our Attorney General, and now now it falls on ecology and the cities and counties to all work together to enforce these requirements. And enforcement is going to be based on complaints that are filed via an online reporting form. We also have a plastic bag ban in Washington State, and they do things very similarly. They have a similar reporting form online. We've basically copied that, and that'll be up and running next July. So what about non-compostable products? So there's a few different things. They're prohibited from using the same requirements as compostable products, and then they're discouraged from using some similar things, and then they're encouraged to use completely different coloring, labeling, and images, basically to, again, get away from that consumer confusion and to really help with sorting by consumers and at our industrial facilities. So I just mentioned some key dates. I just wanted to go over those one more time. January 1, producers need to meet those labeling requirements on those compostable products sold in Washington State. And product declarations need to be submitted to ecology via our online portal. And then by July 1, we'll have our public observation form up and running online. And then enforcement will begin in consultation with our local jurisdictions. And then I have a few links here. I know they're kind of hard to see. It's not easy to click on a link on a slide. So I was going to drop those also in the chat later. We have a mailing list, and then we also have our box platform where we just have tons of resources all about the organics management law. And that's all that I have. Thank you.